Hello and welcome to Stress-Free Longevity. This is episode 15 and my guest today is Professor Joann Manson, who is often cited as one of the most influential scientists in the world, having conducted some of the biggest and most important medical trials. Not that I particularly want to admit this, but I interviewed her a few months ago and I think I was so flustered I forgot to hit record. Not my proudest moment, but she extremely graciously agreed to do it all over again. And this is what you're about to hear. A true living legend. I hope you enjoy. So, Professor Manson, thank you very, very much for joining me on Stress-Free Longevity. Just a nice, simple, easy way to start. If you don't mind, just for the benefit of our listeners, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself, where you are in the world and what your key interests are.
So I'm Joann Manson. I'm professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School, chief of the Division of Preventive Medicine at Brigham and Women's Hospital. I'm an endocrinologist trained in endocrinology and epidemiology, and my main interest has been prevention of chronic diseases, particularly cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and cancer. And we've done large-scale randomized trials to test promising interventions, including dietary supplements, to try to prevent these chronic diseases. I'm principal investigator of the vitamin D and omega-3 trial and the Cosmos trial, co-PI with my colleague, Dr. Sesso, and several other trials over the years.
Any particular financial disclosures you'd like to let the listeners know about?
No, not currently. I don't have any relevant disclosures for this conversation.
Fantastic. Well, look, we're talking primarily about supplements, and supplements have exploded in popularity. Is this filling a genuine need given our modern lifestyle and diets, or have we gone a little bit too far?
I think it's probably gone a little too far. I think one of the most important points to emphasize is that dietary supplements will never be a substitute for a healthy and well-balanced diet and healthy lifestyle. And most people are able to get the nutrients that they need from diet, but you do have to be careful and look at nutrition labels and ensure that you're having, high intake of fruits and vegetables and whole grains and really focusing on whole foods and not having just a lot of ultra processed foods and foods that are very low in nutrients. But it is possible to get the vast majority of the nutrients we need from diet alone. And also these nutrients, micronutrients, are better absorbed from the diet than from dietary supplements.
So just a little bit of basic science, maybe for people who haven't really thought about it as much. Why might supplements be useful? What has changed about our environment or perhaps our physiology that is driving this kind of curiosity around supplementation?
Well, foods are more processed these days, and so some of the vitamins and minerals can be stripped through the food processing part of it. However, I think if we try to focus more on whole foods that are not processed, lots of fruits and vegetables, largely a plant-based diet, and having fish and chicken and, not so much processed meats. I think that it is possible, again, to get the micronutrients and the macronutrients that we need from diet alone. That doesn't mean that some people won't benefit. I do believe that a targeted supplementation approach is most appropriate. There are certain people who really will benefit from taking supplements, and this is both during certain life stages, such as pregnant women. Of course, we recommend folic acid and prenatal vitamin because it's very difficult to get enough folic acid and all the vitamins, minerals needed from diet during that period of time of pregnancy when the needs are increased. Also, infants, there are certain recommendations that include vitamin D for breastfed infant and iron at certain ages during infancy, recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics. And there are also older adults who have osteoporosis or people who have certain malabsorption conditions, such as Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, celiac disease, where taking dietary supplements, multivitamins, and extra vitamins and minerals can be helpful. There's also a condition, macular degeneration, age-related macular degeneration, where randomized trials have shown some benefits of supplementation, and they include certain antioxidant vitamins and also lutein, copper, zinc, some of those micronutrients. So I think it is important to have targeted supplementation for people who have certain health conditions or may have decreased absorption of these vitamins and minerals. But for most healthy adults and children, adolescents, a multivitamin or a dietary supplement really should not be essential. And these nutrients can be obtained from food alone.
Of course, not all supplements are the same. Would you mind just giving us a little indication of what are the different categories of supplementation that are out there?
There are actually more than 90,000 supplements that are on the market, a dizzying array of supplements in grocery stores and pharmacies and nutrition stores. The most commonly used supplements are vitamins and minerals and the omega-3s, fish oil. These are actually dietary supplements that we've extensively studied, including multivitamins and vitamin D, specifically antioxidant vitamins such as vitamin E, vitamin C. But then there's a whole array of herbal products and enzymes and other types of fats that people take and hormones. People will even take various products that may boost estrogens or androgens, different forms of hormones and thyroid type supplements sold over the market. These are not as well studied as vitamins and minerals and the omega-3 fish oil type of supplements. Generally, it's important for the public to understand that dietary supplements can be on the market without proving either safety or efficacy. And they can be pulled from the aisles and the counters if they're shown to have clear safety issues. But to get out there, they don't need to have the clear evidence from randomized trials. It's different from pharmaceutical drugs regulated by the FDA or other, government agencies where they have to prove that they're both effective and are relatively safe. Dietary supplements have much looser regulation. Therefore, we do recommend that they not be used willy-nilly and that only the better studied ones be used. And also that you look on the label, on the bottle itself for the seal of quality control, such as U.S. Pharmacopoeia or in other countries, there may be other types of seals, NSF, National Science Foundation, quality control auditing by consumerlab.com, and other approaches to quality control, but some seal of auditing, external audit, so that you know that the product has the amount, the content that is advertised on the label, the content of whatever the dietary supplement is, and also is free of microbial growth and heavy metals and toxins. There is evidence that some products are out there without the quality control for content, and when actually tested in different research studies, they're shown to have a content of whatever the active ingredient is much lower or sometimes higher than what is being advertised, in terms of the label. And so it's so important to have the external quality control audit.
Well, let's talk about some of the key supplements that you mentioned, that you have been principal investigator on some of the largest trials into some of the supplements that we'd be more familiar with. Would you mind just giving our listeners a little bit of a summary of some of your work? What were some of the key headlines?
So one of the large-scale randomized trials we've done is a vitamin D and omega-3 trial, VITAL, which included nearly 26,000 men and women nationwide in the United States, testing 2,000 IUs of vitamin D3 and 1 gram a day of EPA plus DHA, the marine omega-3 fatty acids, in prevention of cardiovascular disease and cancer as the main goals. But we had a type of design where we could look at the independent effect of the vitamin D and the omega-3s as well as their combined effect. So we could disentangle the effects of the interventions. And generally, what we found was for the vitamin D, 2,000 IUs a day, there were some benefits, but they were relatively limited benefits. Most people did not really clearly benefit from taking a supplement of vitamin D. Where we saw the benefits there was a 22% significant reduction in autoimmune diseases such as rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, lupus, conditions like that, which may be related to the benefit of vitamin D for reducing inflammation, tamping down inflammation, reduced the CRP, C-reactive protein level. So there is evidence that the 2,000 IUs a day of vitamin D will reduce inflammation and CRP levels. We also found a benefit of the vitamin D for reducing advanced cancers, reduction in cancer death and metastatic cancer. And this may be a direct effect of vitamin D on tumor biology. Once tumor clones, cancer cells have begun to form, into clones, there may be an effect of vitamin D in decreasing the likelihood of an invasive cancer that is very deep in the tissue or that becomes metastatic over time. So those were some pretty clear benefits. Plus, we did report recently that vitamin D slowed the telomere shortening that occurs with aging. And the telomeres are the caps at the ends of the chromosomes that tend to shorten with cell replication. Every time cells divide, the telomeres get shorter, and this correlates with biological aging. And the vitamin D, we reported this just a few months ago, actually slowed down that process of telomeres shortening and had a pretty substantial benefit there, which was equivalent over the 4 years that we studied the telomere length. It led to about 3 years of protection in telomere shortening, which was, compared to the placebo group. So this is another promising area of vitamin D that there may be some benefit for slowing biological aging. We need more research in this area. However, vitamin D did not have clear benefits for any of the cardiovascular outcomes, heart disease, stroke, atrial fibrillation. Also, we didn't see clear benefits for cognition or mood, depression, kidney disease, bone health. Surprisingly, we did not see a reduction in osteoporotic fracture or hip fracture, total fractures. Now, one of the reasons that benefits may not have been seen is that most people need only small to moderate amounts of vitamin D, and the general population, the generally healthy population in the US and probably in the UK and many other parts of the world do seem to already have that intake of vitamin D, especially if they come from a country with food fortification. So in the US, there are many foods that are fortified, such as dairy products, cereals, some beverages, such as orange juice. So probably people are getting enough from a fortified food supply plus time outdoors, because we also synthesize vitamin D in the skin, and even incidental sun exposure, just being outside running errands or spending, some time during the months of the year from spring through early fall, is enough. Even at the higher latitudes. However, there are times during the year when you get very little vitamin D through the skin, through UVB, ultraviolet B light exposure. But usually there's enough through the diet that you can compensate. The bottom line is that vitamin D did have some benefits, but they were limited. It was not a panacea. It was not a cure-all, and it shouldn't be perceived as a magic pill that will cure and prevent all health problems. First, most people don't need it if they are getting even small to moderate amounts of vitamin D from diet, fortified foods, and sun exposure. And the main food sources of vitamin D are fish, fatty fish, actually, and wild mushrooms are the best natural food sources, and then the dairy products and other fortified as cereals and fortified foods. So most people are getting enough to not need a supplement, but we did see, probably through the inflammation pathway, that vitamin D does hold promise for reducing inflammation and conditions that are clearly linked to inflammation. And that includes telomere shortening, which is impacted by chronic inflammation, systemic inflammation. So we think more research is needed on vitamin D. But another finding that we had with vitamin D is that the greatest benefits were seen in people who were at healthy weight. And there was something about high body mass index and high adiposity levels that interfered with receiving the full benefits of vitamin D. As a result, we want to test some different formulations of vitamin D that could bypass whatever this concern is about the metabolism or the efficacy of vitamin D in the setting of high body mass index or high levels of adiposity. And throughout most of the Western world, a high body mass index is highly prevalent. So I think more research is needed in this area. Now let me turn to the omega-3s. What we found for 1 gram a day of the omega-3s was a significant reduction in heart attack, 28% reduction in heart attack or myocardial infarction, but no reduction in stroke and no significant reduction in our primary endpoint of major cardiovascular events, which included both coronary heart disease and stroke. There's other research also to suggest that the marine omega-3s, EPA, DHA, have benefits for reducing heart disease, but not stroke. We also had evidence that people in the VITAL trial who already had the average intake of fish through their diet, which was 1.5 servings of fish per week or more, they did not benefit from the omega-3s. However, those who had lower intake of fish did have up to a 40% lower risk of heart attack. And this again suggests that if you're low in the diet on a nutrient, you are more likely to benefit from a supplement than if you're already getting adequate intake from your diet. So first focus on diet, but with omega-3s, if you, for example, really hate fish, or there are reasons you can't eat fish, then you may want to talk with your healthcare provider about taking an omega-3 supplement. And there are also prescription omega-3 products that are very well tested for quality control. We actually tested a prescription product that was very high quality for the EPA plus DHA. There's a lot of enthusiasm right now for high dose EPA without the DHA, because the Reduce It trial did show some greater benefits for EPA alone than the combination EPA DHA, but I think that needs much more research. And there have been some concerns raised about the mineral oil placebo used in that trial. So I would say more research is needed, but overall, the VITAL trial and our meta-analyses and other meta-analyses of randomized trials of omega-3s suggest that the marine EPA DHA or EPA alone do decrease heart attacks, but most of the trials do not show benefits for stroke or for the endpoint of major cardiovascular events. In the Cosmos trial, we studied both a cocoa extract and multivitamins. It actually found some benefits for each. Very large trial, 21,000 participants nationwide. For the cocoa flavanols and the cocoa extract, we found about a 27% reduction in cardiovascular death, but not a significant reduction in the primary endpoint of heart attack, stroke, multiple other cardiovascular events. But we did see with the cocoa extract some benefits for age-related memory loss. So there seemed to be some cognitive benefits, especially in those who had low intake of the cocoa flavanols at baseline. Now, the multivitamins had previously been shown to reduce cancer, a slight reduction in cancer, about 8% reduction in the Physicians Health Study 2. And we want to test it again for cancer and also for cardiovascular disease and cognition. Where we saw the real benefits of the multivitamins in the Cosmos trial was for cognition, with 3 separate sub-studies, placebo-controlled sub-studies assessing cognition in different ways. The in-clinic visits, the most standardized way, doing it by telephone, doing it by a web-based assessment. All 3 showed that the participants randomized to multivitamins had better performance on the cognitive tests, less age-related memory loss, less cognitive decline than the group randomized to a placebo. So it was a direct comparison with a placebo group. And the results were actually quite exciting, really suggesting that these micronutrients, the combination of 20 or more vitamins, minerals, they have some benefits in preventing or slowing age-related memory loss. And we know that nutrition is tremendously important for optimal brain health. So it actually makes sense. We need more research on this subject, and the role of multivitamins and these various vitamins and minerals in protecting cognition, slowing age-related memory loss. But just earlier this week, there was a very exciting finding on lithium being tremendously important in terms of brain health and reducing, risk of Alzheimer's disease. And, so I think that studying nutritional products, doing more in these areas of research, I think will be really important to understand ways to protect brain health, to slow cognitive decline, age-related memory loss, and reduce the risk of Alzheimer's, which is increasing at a rapid rate and will, based on projections, will be a very large percentage of future populations.
Do you suspect that some of the benefits seen in trials are primarily in people who may be deficient in the nutrient in question? Or is there still a benefit, do you think, in supplementation, even if people are still getting what would be perceived a normal amount within their diet?
I think it's mostly for people who have the deficiencies. However, as we found in the VITAL trial, for certain outcomes, there may be benefits in getting more than average intakes. For most outcomes, it seems to be of no additional benefit. Once you get to a threshold of intake, more is not necessarily better. In fact, more can be worse. You can get too much of calcium, vitamin D, iron. For most nutrients, there's a balance where the ideal amount is more moderate, and too little and too much can be dangerous. Everything in moderation, that's a generally very important principle that does apply to nutrition. It certainly applies to hormones, and vitamin D is a form of a hormone. You don't want to give too much. Too much has been linked to higher blood and urine calcium and some side effects. So I think that overall, it's those who have a deficiency who benefit the most. But with vitamin D, we are seeing with higher intakes, there may be more tamping down of inflammation. So certain conditions may be benefited by a little more than the more moderate intakes that have been recommended by, let's say, the Institute of Medicine or the National Academy of Medicine. But for the most part, the principle that more is not necessarily better would hold. And it's really a matter of just getting to the moderate intake that's needed. And taking more than that is not likely to confer additional benefits.
And that's probably worth emphasizing as well, because there's a presumption that supplements are inherently healthy. I think that would be what the general public would perceive. Oh, it's a healthy thing. It must be well regulated. And I think you've alluded to that there are some dangers with supplementation. Would that be fair? We should be cautious with supplementation. There are downsides and potential negative effects.
Especially with mega dosing of supplements, there can be many downsides, and it's important to avoid mega dosing, avoid more than the moderate intake that is recommended. And most of these dietary supplements have not been shown to have benefits. They haven't been tested for efficacy or safety. I think that it's very difficult to design a randomized trial based on treating people who are identified on the basis of being deficient, because once you know they're deficient, if you are, for example, screening for deficiency in order to get into a trial, you would want to treat people you have identified as deficient in vitamin D or omega-3. You wouldn't want to have them go into a trial for 5 or more years where they have a 50% chance of getting a placebo for the next 5 years when you've already identified them as being deficient. This is an ethical issue that arises with, doing randomized trials, that generally, you don't want to be identifying people who are already profoundly deficient, because those people should be treated right at the start and not put into a long-term randomized trial with a high chance of getting placebo. So this is why in many of the randomized trials that have been done, you have largely healthy populations where people are not profoundly deficient. But we already know that profound deficiency should be treated. So doing a trial of that would not be very informative, because we know we should treat profound deficiency. And the question instead, the scientific question, is for people who already have like recommended intakes or average intakes, is there a greater health benefit in taking beyond that recommended level, having higher intakes?
And that leads us on to kind of practical takeaways. I guess the primary audience that I'm addressing are people who maybe are more middle to late age and who are just wanting to be healthy and well and wanting to maximize their opportunity for a long and healthier life. What can I do now that will benefit me now and in the future? Now, it's a very confusing space, isn't it? I mean, if you look on social media, you would believe that you needed dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of supplements in order to be healthy and well. So what would your recommendation be for people like me who are confused by the space, who could believe that they're missing out or need to be taking all of these supplements? For someone who is of regular and average health and wellness, no major medical conditions, maybe eating a reasonably varied diet, does supplementation fit into that person, or is it needed?
So I think for people who are seeking a healthy life, the lowest risk possible of chronic diseases, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, cancer, cognitive decline, the focus really should be on healthy diet and healthy lifestyle. And this includes having a diet that is predominantly plant-based, does not need to be vegetarian or vegan, but predominantly plant-based, lots of fruits and vegetables and whole grains, whole foods, fish, trying to really minimize processed foods, red meats, processed meats, that type of diet, more of a Mediterranean type dietary pattern, unsaturated fats emphasized over saturated fats, or the DASH diet, high in fruits and vegetables. That is the type of diet that's been linked in many studies to a longer life. Also, regular physical activity. I cannot stress that enough. And this includes both the aerobic exercise, even brisk walking, jogging, tennis, racket sports, being physically active with both aerobic activities and with some strength training, resistance training, some muscle strengthening exercises such as elastic bands or free weights, or various activities that are more resistance based. This is what is so important for healthy life, prevention of chronic disease. Now, what is the role of dietary supplements? If there are reasons that you think you cannot get enough of the vitamin D, or let's say you have lactose intolerance and you cannot have any of these fortified dairy products, you may want to take a supplement. Let's say you have osteoporosis, or you're in a facility, nursing facility, whatever, where your diet is restricted, you can't have time outdoors, or you have Crohn's disease or celiac disease, and you're worried about absorption of vitamins and minerals. That's when a supplement would be a benefit. You don't eat fish at all. You don't get the marine omega-3s. That's when, fish oil or omega-3 supplement would be needed. If you have macular degeneration, do look for these formulations that are intended for people with macular degeneration, because they've been well tested and shown to slow the progression of the disease. Again, people with bone health problems, if they have osteoporosis, they're being treated with medications for osteoporosis. That's where these supplements are worthwhile. Now, is there a role in a healthy individual without any of those indications for taking vitamin D, omega-3s, multivitamins? I think with multivitamins, because the prior research suggested at least a small reduction in cancer, total invasive cancer, and these recent findings are suggesting that there are benefits for age-related memory loss, cognition, and even a study has been reported at a conference that multivitamins may slow biological aging, such as these epigenetic clocks. I think it's getting to a point where professional organizations that write the guidelines should seriously consider recommending a multivitamin for older adults, even midlife, for these benefits that have now been seen in many of the randomized trials. I think someone who wants, as a form of insurance, to hedge their bets to take a multivitamin, I think it is extremely reasonable. It's very safe. All of our trials and other trials of multivitamins have shown that even long-term use with multivitamins is very safe. And there were some benefits of the cocoa extract as well. But, overall, I think that most of these supplements are not needed. There may be a role as a form of insurance for multivitamins, vitamin D for the various scenarios we just discussed, and omega-3s if you don't eat fish at all, you have very low fish consumption. I think it's worth discussing with your healthcare provider. If you have multiple risk factors for cardiovascular disease, you may want to discuss it. But for the most part, there are so many other dietary supplements on the market that are not well tested and have not been shown to have clear benefits in randomized trials, and may even have toxicities and side effects when taken in high doses. I would not recommend most of the dietary supplements that are on the market.
Yes, I was going to ask you that because, again, there is increasingly exotic supplements. As you said, there are over 90,000. So what should the average person do? Should we, and I know this is probably unfair to ask you, but should we be a little bit skeptical of all supplements until we see some better evidence? Should we just kind of stay away, focus on, as you said, better lifestyle, better diet, better exercise, and await better science? And my second question is, there's so much conflicting science out there, and there's a lot of pseudo expertise on social media, a lot of very convincing speakers. So for the average person, what would be a good source of knowledge with regards to supplementation? And should we put all that effort into just good lifestyle over any supplements?
Yes, I think that there's a primacy of healthy diet, healthy lifestyle over supplements. In terms of dietary supplements, I think the principle of buyer beware, consumer beware applies. We should have skepticism. We can spend a huge amount of our hard-earned money paying for dietary supplements that we take every day for years and years and years, and derive no benefits, and maybe even have risks with long-term use based on so little evidence, that we don't know if there's going to be a benefit, and various supplements have been linked to some side effects and risk. So I would say buyer beware, and don't take supplements that are not well tested, where you can't see, that there have been clear benefits found. In terms of websites that can be reliable to check, the U.S. National Institutes of Health Office of Dietary Supplements has good summaries of many of these dietary supplements. I'm sure in the UK and in other countries, there are many government sources that could be used for this purpose. There also are many media sources that can be reliable, but I don't want to single any of them out. But the publications, the media sources that are very highly ranked, those would be the ones that you may want to rely on to get additional information. But primarily, I would go with sources such as Office of Dietary Supplements, government-based sources, American Heart Association, American Dietetic Association, and the counterpart in UK and elsewhere around the world, where these are foundations or government agencies that are tasked with providing reliable information on these subjects. American Cancer Society and many others.
Is there a role for testing for deficiency? Do you think that should be left to your doctor to decide? Or do you feel like there will be a time in the future where it's cheap enough to just get a suite of deficiency tests? And is that a benefit before considering supplementation?
So that can be extremely expensive, and many of the tests that are done for that purpose have not been well studied for reliability. Again, I would say discuss something like this with your healthcare provider, whether you should be tested. There are some conditions, B12 deficiency, for example, which can contribute to cognitive decline and anemia and many other problems. I think that there are conditions like that where testing is worthwhile. However, I wouldn't recommend using some of these commercial sources for testing for a wide range of nutrients, micronutrients, because I think you could spend a lot of money on that. And I don't know that would really end up being helpful to you. So I think that kind of testing really should be done through a discussion with your healthcare provider and determining what would be most appropriate for you. If you're on certain medications, long-term medications, sometimes testing for deficiencies are recommended with certain medications for diabetes or for our reflux disease and other conditions like that. They may actually want to test for the development of deficiencies. And in some cases, testing for vitamin D deficiency would be worthwhile, especially with the bone health problems or malabsorption kinds of conditions, but not routinely. Most of the professional societies do not recommend routine universal testing for vitamin D or most of these other levels.
Would you feel comfortable telling us what you take? I was just curious, given what you know about the industry and all the science, are there any supplements that you have been convinced are beneficial for health and longevity?
Yeah, I take a multivitamin daily, and I think that the evidence for safety is so strong, 11 years in the US Physicians Health Study 2. That trial was very long term, showed about 8% reduction in cancer, total cancers, and then in the Cosmos trial, the benefits in terms of cognition, age-related memory loss. Multivitamins have been well studied. They've been shown to have some clear benefits, and also they're very safe. And they're just the RDA daily intake levels of these micronutrients, of a wide range of micronutrients. They're not mega doses. They're not high doses well above daily intakes. So I think that's reasonable at this point.
Are there any exciting supplement or supplement trials on the horizon? What are the most exciting type of supplements that may be showing some benefit that we should watch out for in the future?
Well, I think that there are several, and some of them are kind of extensions of findings that the large scale trials to date have had. I mean, I think vitamin D needs further study, especially different formulations that can bypass interference by high levels of adiposity, and maybe a more metabolized form of vitamin D to see if more of those benefits can be achieved. I think the EPA alone needs more study, because there is that trial, Reduce It, as I mentioned, that seemed to show much greater benefits than combination EPA plus DHA. I think that warrants further study. I think multivitamins, further work on the cognition, further work on different age groups and quality of life warrants study. I think that the finding just very recently about lithium maybe being of benefit for cognitive health and prevention of dementia, Alzheimer's disease, I think that warrants randomized trial study and further study. So there are actually many other supplements that I think warrant additional testing.
Professor Manson, thank you so much for your time. This has been absolutely fabulous. We just like to leave our speaker with one last opportunity, just to leave the listeners with any final take-home messages. What would you want us to specifically leave with?
Well, again, healthy diet, healthy lifestyle. And when it comes to dietary supplements, in most cases, save your money on those supplements and use the money you've saved on improving your diet, having a higher quality diet, and a healthier lifestyle. And overall, I think that will lead to much better health than spending a lot of money on dietary supplements that aren't needed.
Professor Manson, thank you so much for joining me today.
You're very welcome, Owen. It was great talking with you.
So huge thanks again to Professor Joann Manson. I think my key take-home messages are, number one, there are over 90,000 supplements on the market, but unlike prescription drugs, they don't need to be proved safe or effective before being sold. So do not assume that supplements are inherently healthy. Number two, Professor Manson has conducted the most rigorous supplement trials in the world, each of them failing to show that that supplement was the panacea that it was considered to possibly be. Number three, more isn't better when it comes to supplements. Too much can actually harm you by creating dangerous imbalances in your body. Number four, supplements only really make sense in specific circumstances where you are known or likely to be deficient in nutrients, such as pregnancy, in malabsorption conditions, or if you don't eat certain food groups, such as fish. And finally, number five, Professor Manson's advice for everyone else is simple. Save your money on supplements and spend it on improving your diet and lifestyle instead. Although she does take one supplement herself, a basic multivitamin, which is safe and may improve memory and lower risk of cancer. Don't forget, you can access lots more content on my social media channels. All of the information can be found at stressfreelongevity.com. Until next time, take care.